Ah, damn. It's that time. Another Wednesday night, another deep dive into the fringes of esoteric research. With we got some returning champions here. Of course, y'all know him, you love him. Gabriel, the slickest of all dissidents who can do the splits in his PJs. And we got George for his Jorge Mesa of Third Eye Edify podcast. He is returning to the channel, but it's his first Vibrant after that incredible music theory episode that he gave us, all that great research. I was like, I need you to start talking to Lucas and create another amazing conversation for us. And then Lucas got pretty gung-ho about their collaborations, and now we've got 44 slides to go through. You guys know Lucas, of course, LC King of the eponymous Rockfin channel name. And right, so what do you guys think? We should probably start talking. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Excellent.
Excellent. That's right. Fired up. Very calm, but excellent. George, so what's life been like since we last talked? You know, did you guys really spiral up into some wild rapid fire conversations, you and Lucas?
Oh, yeah. We're talking almost daily since then, you know. It's been awesome, man. I'm so glad that you connected us because we're finding things out about our own level, you know, our own sides of the research, and it's really exciting. It's really cool.
Yeah, George has been the master and I've been the apprentice.
Yeah, right.
With music stuff, I'm just like, I feel like someone's, you know, when I ask him questions and I get an answer, it's like someone talking about how I talk about the galvanic cell. You know what I mean? It's like, what? So I'm trying to work it out, but yeah, definitely nowhere near his level of expertise in music sort of theory, but we'll do our best. Hey.
Yeah, maybe we'll even get him to play the bass again. That was awesome. What's up, everyone
fun.
in the chat? I see Zerlath, Michelle Mullen, and Michelle of Michelle's Healing Home. Glenn J, good to see you all here. Sound off in the chat if you present. Let people know that you are in this live chat and that it's really fun. Bring your friends. It's going to be a good one. Nicholas Burnett, good to have your comment and your presence. Thank you so much. Gabriel, I'm sure you've got a full cup. Enneagram much? You going to be on the Enneagram? Are you going to fuse the Enneagram into this conversation?
I think so, man. Yeah. The Enneagram has really been my focus. And, you know, LC dropped a little video on me about a week ago about the math magic of 1 divided by 7 and how that reveals the repeating pattern of the 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, and 8 of the Enneagram, and it avoids the 3, 6, 9. So the 1, 7 has been on my radar for a long time, going back to when we did the last show with LC King. In the aspect of the 17th triangular number is 153. That's the number of the fish in the net. And we know that there are fishers of men, and the 153 is just popping up everywhere I look. So yeah, it's and then there's the Q of it all, which is just like, you know, you got to get rid of the urge to not pay attention to that letter. You got to, you know, spit the name out of your mouth and move on. So yeah, the 1 and the 7 has been really revealing to me. So yeah, I'm looking forward to filling in more plugs.
I didn't know that about 1 divided by 7, but it actually kind of makes sense that if you divide the 1, the monad, by 7, the septenary, that it creates some sort of dynamic where the Trinity becomes hidden.
Yes.
It's still present. It's in between the lines or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a very entertaining rabbit hole, and I'm still journeying around in that realm of form. So this will be fun to get musical with it.
Cool, guys. Well, should we jump in? You guys have other opening thoughts before we do?
We've got a bit of geometry to get through with this because just of how music is actually, you know, how you find the notes in music and the harmonics and that reciprocal numbers. So yeah, well, let's get into it. And for the start of this, I really did just like a rehash of a few different ideas that we've already gone across. So I thought we can just quickly go through them, so it gives people a basis to work from, you know.
In the words of Ben Balderson, you betcha. And here we are, the threshing floor. Cool. Yeah, I heard some of this get talked about. I've heard bits and pieces of where we're going with this, but walk us through some of these key words here in our introductory slide.
So the threshing floor is basically the symbolism I've found that is really, really appropriate for the zodiac, and something that they did in the past that was sort of their actions was playing out the heavens in a sense. So, and basically what it was is a circular floor with a post in the center, and you would put all your wheat and grains on, lay it down with the stalks on, and then you'd walk the animals around the circle, and they'd crush all the stalks of the wheat, and that would free up the seeds. And you would usually tie the animal to that central pillar, and that would guide the animals around in the circle, and there'll be a man behind it walking. And you'd either use horses or you would use ox. So what they were basically playing out is that central pillar, or that Mount Meru, or the Omphalos stone, Polaris would be that central pillar that you and Mario touched on a lot in the last episode. And then the animals, which is basically the zodiac, which is an animal. The zodiac means circle of animals, or animal circle. And so the animals would walk around that, and that would be representative of the seasons, or the hours, and the stars as well, and sun and moon. And you get all those concepts that come around, and they're just circling around this singular gnomon, or the point. So that's why I thought I'd just start this off, because it sort of leads into a bunch of different other geometries that come from this as well, the monad.
Awesome, man. You guys got anything to jump in on? Just feel free to fire out there. We definitely want to hear from you, George. I mean, and Gabriel too, but we know he's not shy.
Well, I see the maypole here for sure. It's almost exactly the same idea. If there was a tent involved, let's say, this could look a lot like that. And it's just a total sync on this one too, because I just did something on sundials, and the sundial has a gnomon. It's this is a sundial, so it's just a great coincidence there. I see exactly why we're putting this out first too. It's going to be a big factor musically, astrologically, and in all the topics that we're going to discuss.
Yeah, that's correct. It is a sundial, so you'll be able to tell the seasons and the hours from it. And we'll look at, as we go forward, you'll see that the horse and these three aspects start to come into play, which will relate to your Enneagram and those sort of things as well.
Nice.
Okay.
So just a couple like random weaves to kind of fill in, like you mentioned the maypole. And one thing I learned was that with the maypole, the boys would have like sometimes one color of a ribbon, and the girls would have another color. And the boys would go in one direction, and the girls would go the other direction, and they would crisscross and make an X as they crossed each other's paths, going in two opposite directions. And then in the end, the ribbons created a perfect, like a woven structure around the pole, much like I know this is a kind of a bad college joke, but it's like finger cuffs. You know how they're like this fancy weave that, yeah. And then the other thing that comes to mind is the fact that barley stone is something that used to grind the grains, and Rockefeller's name means barley stone. And Samson was spent the end of his days working on the mill. We're pushing the millstone. And also, all of this ties to that North Star we know, the pole star concept. And we know that that's very important symbolically to the powers that be, because the word continuation of government is COG, the cog, the continuation of the covenant, the COG. So these symbols are very important to the very high up powers that be.
I've been thinking a lot lately. The pole star is very possibly the monad or the first person of the Trinity. And in the ancient stuff, as far as I can tell, that's the being in terms of gods that they didn't make images of. And the very fact that the character, the number one, resembles like, you know, an obelisk, phallus. This is the pattern, the pater, you know, the first circle, that the next one that comes off of it, the duad, or the duad, it is actually creating two more persons of the Trinity in and of itself, because as it moves away from the first circle, you know, in a geometry sense, you get a second circle, but now you have the vesica between them. So the one divides into two, which automatically becomes three. And that makes me think too of like how what you just described with the braiding around the pole, the maypole, and the fact that braid, it sounds like bride. You know, the duad is the bride of the monad. You bridle the horse, and the horse is what's going around the pole. It's attached by a bridle. You know, there's like a lot of, it's all one thing, you know?
Yeah, that's great.
You're setting it up nicely, because there's a bunch of slides that are going to show exactly what you said, as well as how that relates to music. So let's go.
Let's go.
Yeah, this is
awesome.
So this one's just, again, we probably just covered this. I just added it in, but it's got the horse. You can see when you take the vowels out, you get the hours, you get this Horai as well, which we'll get to that, which is basically the three goddesses of the seasons, the natural portions of time. They presided over the revolutions of the heavenly constellations, which the year was measured. So basically, they were the sort of the three fates, spinned out the web of fate, you know. Yeah, so that you can see I've done a picture there with the 9 months, the year divided into 9, and they would be the three sort of the spring, the summer, and the winter would be the three seasons, which is an interesting way to actually divide the year up. You can do it multiple ways, but the Ennead is a nice way of doing it. It means it's divided into 36 days per month, and yeah, you do that 9 times. So, 40 days. That's the fasty calendar. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I love that you brought up this connection of the horse to the HRS, the Hey Resh Shen of the Hebrew language, which is also, you know, it's in all kinds of languages, but it's that which is carrying, like Har, but it's also your Horus. It's you know, if all you have to do is add a C before it to have CHRS, and you've got your Cress, which is the origin of Christianity. Christus meaning good in Greek, which good, we know good is God and all that. I mean, there's also
chorus.
Chorus.
Right.
Yeah.
Chorus. Yeah. Perfect. Big time. Yeah. What else do we want to throw out on this?
Oh, no. Let's go to the next one. So we've got on that central gnomon, that central pillar, we've got Apollo seated on the omphalos stone. Again, I've gone back to show that, you know, this is related to the net, to the stone, also the serpent that's wrapped around the stone. These sort of ideas all come from that central pillar idea, and Apollo is basically logos. The idea of the mediator, the harmony between these sort of extremes, and that's what the sort of pole star is. In a sense, it's this extreme between the sun and the moon, which is seen as sort of like twins, two polarities, and it mediates between the two. So, and we'll get into how that applies to music and the keyboard as well, and where that actually fits into that.
I think we should quickly throw in too, based on the previous slide, that the number 3, you know, it's obviously a triad musically speaking, and in other things that we're going to discuss, but there's other trinities that exist in music, and I think it's really going to keep the 3 in mind. It's going to be a very impactful number throughout all of this too.
Yeah, man, I'm glad we stopped on this for a second. So AP is a 1-7 in ordinal reduced. So we're already, and then we got a triangle as well. I've been thinking a lot about Apollo. He's been on my mind a lot, but the way we spell it is generally AP, Alo. So yeah, and the music, here comes the music for sure.
Well, that's
Yeah,
right. He was
this image is interesting. I actually I'm trying to read what the Greek words are in the coin right now. Looks
So
like we have
Greek reading.
ILSI L. Yeah, and then E.
ISO.
The last word is the hard one. I'm pretty sure that's an omega, and then another S. So that's like Ilsi Isilios.
Is it Illinois?
I don't
It's
know what the
Illinois.
word is. There's no N.
So Apollo and Artemis have really been coming up a lot. They, you know, they're the twins. They're like babushka dolls of meaning. Clearly, you know, one has a silver bow, one has the golden bow, so they got the moon and the sun. But I'm also seeing, I think, the yoke shapes of the lunar standstills, the two nodes. I think they're also embodying the lunar standstill nodes with their opposing bows, because one lunar standstill is in Sagittarius, which is the sage guitarius. Apollo is the guitarius, the guitar player. And the other one, their yoke or node shape, is up in Taurus, just about in opposition. I think that's why the Sagittarius, I always aim my arrow towards the bull, because sage guitarius, there's the corresponding nodes there. So that's where my research is kind of drumming up lately.
Oh, super awesome. I'm getting lost in the Greek letters. Let's go forward. Yeah, okay. So he's on the omphalos again. Looks like some serpents or something coming off of it too.
And they got the lyre, which is, yeah, I'm not sure how many strings it said he had, like maybe 7 strings or something like that. But yeah, so he's the god of sort of harmony and music as well. So
okay, I see the Jesus
it's 11
parable.
strings according to a quick Google search. We know we can't necessarily trust that.
So I see the Jesus parable here, which, you know, probably came from Apollo. So a man was sick. Jesus had him lay down on his side, and Jesus dabbed a piece of bread in vinegar, and while the man's laying naked on his side, and he puts the piece of bread just a little distance away from his butthole, and a tapeworm crawls out of the guy's butthole. And Jesus takes a stick or a rock. He takes a stone and smashes the tapeworm's head. And then there's some, you know, wisdom healing parable that comes out of that story. But all the ingredients are here.
It's coming out of his butt. Yeah, I guess it's true. Good call. That's really interesting. That would be what a real physician did: deparasite you, deworm you.
okay, so we're sort of getting into the geometry a little bit now. So in the Greek mythology, the so-called robe or veil of harmonia was probably the reference to the geometrical net. It is a fish's net for the entire pattern, is governed by the square root of 3. In the realm of geometry, springs from the Vesica Pisces, the vessel of the fish. The symbolism predates Christianity and represents the woven web of nature, or the vilifying power of harmony, which enforces the pattern of creation. The omphalos stone is the temple of Apollo at Delphi was covered with a netting pattern. In the language of ancient mysticism, to unrail the veil is to discover the weaver. So this basically the different ratios that come out of the Vesica are extremely important to how you actually work out the frequencies or the harmonies in music, and, you know, create those distances in the string. and it's all out of the vesica that allows you to do that. Those types of basically their harmonic means in a sense. So we'll keep going. Whip through these first few.
Okay, cool.
So this is the net, and it's based on 37 points, or and you'll see that it has the cube that's embedded into it, which is a 27-faced cube, or it's basically the Rubik's cube. And you can see how this is important. It is sort of descriptive of the Trinity in its full flower of life sort of thing. It's 37 times 3 gives you these triple digits that actually start to repeat. So has special qualities, the 37.
Do you know I'm guessing is a prime number. Do we know what number prime 37 is? Kind of curious about that. I'll just go look it up.
Yeah, look it up. I don't know.
This is review from a presentation you've already given us, but it's worth, like, I'm glad we're reviewing it because
it's the 12th.
The 12th. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, buddy.
Okay.
The 12th prime number is 37. That seems like really important. Yeah. And interestingly, the 37 times 12 gives you 444, another 12.
Yeah,
which is a multiple of 1776.
And you'll see these numbers, the 666 and the 888, relate directly to musical notes and where they're positioned. So, and this flower of life has a direct relationship to the proportions of music, the perfect fifth, the perfect fourth, and those sort of things. Yep.
Right.
Wow,
and the
it's
second
starting to already sound like maybe the system of musical theory has some deep justifications in geometry.
Yeah, it's built off it.
Awesome.
So I just wanted to show that this omphalos and how it connects using the septenary cipher. You'll get the number 27. You'll get the word equus, or the other ones, Jesus, is the same, has the same with it has a 4 and a 5 instead of a 5 and a 4. But you'll get the 666 that comes out of the 216, 18, those sort of things. But it's all based on the word omphalos, which Apollo sits on, which is that sort of central Mount Meru, central rock, the gnomon.
Did you know that another word for omphalos, or a modern meaning for omphalos, is the scar where the umbilical cord was attached?
Oh, that does ring a bell. Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought Gabriel might need to know
Hell
that.
yeah, I'm loving it. It's that Yggdrasil, the egg and the lizard.
Yeah. So there's a 20. That's how you can draw the 27 total cubes in there. It has. So basically, that's how that comes into. It's the Rubik's cube that comes in there. Actually, the 27th cube, it has 26 on the outside, and then the 27th cube is hidden inside it. And the Rubik's cube has a heap of numbers sort of like encoded in how you do it and all this sort of stuff as well. It's like a whole study in itself, you know. So the 27, like we said, was the omphalos. It's also the equus, the Jesus. They're both exactly the same in sort of septenary cipher. And they also have an encoding of 432 as well. So, yep. Again, we see the 27 is in terminal. Mercury and Jesus, they all have the same breakdown in septenary. And that just, again, is more backing up the 20, how important the 27 is. In relation to this sort of flower of life, the cube, and also to the moon's synodic time as well. There's a deep relationship with the moon in the 27 days that it takes for a synodic of the moon. They call it a sidereal, but that's just in their heliocentric model. But it's actually a synodic.
Yeah, man. Interesting that like you just showed us all that cube stuff, the black stone in Dylan's fourth book. He talks about how a lot of these gods were worshipped with a black cube, a square black stone, or something along those lines. Terminus was one of them, and so was Mercury. As you're showing here in the gematria, we're talking about the same being. Mercury sets the boundaries, right?
Yeah, they're all examples of Apollo. Just different sort of version, different names. It's the same theme between. It's a mediator between the sun and the moon, or this the midpoint between. You'll see that this actually ties into music amazingly well. It's really an amazing system.
And
So
something to mention too before I forget, because I always forget to mention this when I'm talking about this stuff, is that the 28th partial of the overtone series is another octave. So if we see 27, we could be getting basically a complete set. It just doesn't have another octave, or it could actually be that the fundamental counts as 0 and 27 in that scenario equals 28, and we get, it's an octave. It could actually represent an octave too.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like that law of Kal-El in gematria, that plus or minus 1, and it's the same number right. Mystically.
Right.
Wow. So it's almost like the Fool card, the 0 card, could be that Omphalos egg in the beginning,
Yeah.
And then that 27 character, the mercurial character, could be completion of one side or starting the other side. So he's like crossing the boundary between the octaves in that way too.
Wow, that's cool.
That's cool.
So something that came up listening to Balderson on Crow is he mentioned lithium being a key element of his work, and I'm thinking that lithium corresponds with the number 3 on the Enneagram, but it has always, the word lithium and Lilith, I've always corresponded those very strongly, but there's a thing called lithophilia. Lithophilia is like the love of stones. And so if you're like Chance, you're probably a lithophile. Did you know that?
It's not because I talk like this.
Yeah, but that's something that's been on my radar, is like so I'm putting lithium and Lilith in number 3 in my Enneagram, which is a multiple of that 27. But I think we got an interesting fundamental. This idea of the stone is the fundamental, the 0 is the fundamental, the base, the starting point. And here we've gotten to 27, and we're realizing we've completed this. This is really fun.
Yeah.
So we're just looking at the Flower of Life again, and it's basically, you can see that the 666 is, it's got 3 hexagrams basically, and they're nestled inside each other. And so that gives you the 666, which we'll see is related to a perfect fifth and is related to the sun. And
makes me think of the equator and the tropics too.
Definitely.
Actually, there is a correspondence there on how you do mapping and this Flower of Life as well.
You think this could be a more true design of major ley lines on the realm too?
It's possible. It's hard to say. We just don't have enough information to base anything on, really, of how things are laid out,
Yeah, because I always found it like really hard to understand ley lines on a ball, and have been waiting for somebody to present to me a flat plane realm ley line map to see like what the geometry would look like there.
When I applied this to our realm and gave the rough do the rough mathematics of distances, you actually get this nice sort of ratio between nautical miles and actual miles. Like miles are actually sort of explaining the radius, whereas nautical miles are sort of explaining the circumference. So there's this like nice little correlation, and all the numbers are sort of harmonics of each other as well, which is nice.
Wow.
Again,
that's fascinating. I think there's a whole lot to that. There's St. Peter's Cross is called the Nautical Cross, and it's down in the southern hemisphere. And it's for the navigantes, the navigators, the sailors. And then, so that's just a thought. I often wonder if the sailors and the pirates, if they venerate the cosmology of the southern hemisphere more, and if the landlubbers up in the northern hemisphere, if they get the pole star up north. And there's like two poles, a Joaquin and a Boaz in that aspect, theoretically.
There's also the theory that Topher put out there recently about the Earth either being paramagnetic or diamagnetic, depending on the region. And that basically that's like magnetism that's either I think diamagnetic is where it's like a straight line type of magnetism is in a directional flow. And then paramagnetic is where it's like going in all directions. And I could be butchering this podcast bro science, but it makes me think of like, I wonder if the, northern hemisphere regions that have a more complete view of the north and the pole have that diamagnetic, and you see the more like sort of masculine left brain dominated, very singular direction of purpose type societies, more the northern, and the southern are more easygoing, socially cohesive, conforming but harmonious, chaotic in a way, less structure.
I've wondered about like that, where if your position where you live actually dictates like some, these outcomes of cultural stuff, you know what I mean? Like
that's
you look at this
astrocartography. There's a whole study of that too.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. But I was like, how did Australians end up the way they are? Like, just yeah.
That's great. I love that idea. Not to derail too much, but there's one of the in the 30s. There's a famous author, and he escapes me right now, but he wrote about werewolves. And his philosophy was that northern peoples are more carnivorous because they don't have abundant fruit all the time, so they got to eat animals, so they're more carnivorous, and that they are the source of owning other humans as property, and this is why they're so obsessive. And when they marry each other, there's like a jealousy to the bone built into their DNA. So when they marry somebody, they're like, they got the contracts, they got the, I'll kill anybody who messes with my girl. They got all that in their mentality. So they're considered like the werewolf carnivorous blood types. And then he also says that people down around the tropics, they're like a little willy-nilly. They don't necessarily have to get married. And if you're, there's more swingers down around the waistband of the globe.
This makes me think of the mythology of, I think, probably one of the main origins of the lycanthrope idea. King Lycaon of Greece. He was the guy that fed Zeus, not Zeus's own son, but the king fed Zeus his own son as a test of Zeus's omniscience. Like I got into a Lycaon rabbit hole after having Mario on last Sunday night, and because one of the images from that book was of that particular myth. And it's interesting because you have the like in it, which is like, wolf, lycanthrope, that whole word. And then Kaon, or Caon, is almost like Cohen, which is the name for a priest or a dog, depending on the language. So it's like suggesting maybe that this burnt flesh offering to the gods that is sort of cannibalistic and distasteful is a origin of the priest class. The priest classes are the werewolves, if you will. I don't know.
Yeah. Yep. I think that guy. I think that character is on H.P. Lovecraft's cover. I think that mythological character is on the cover, so it's pretty important to some of those darker occultists.
All right, let's get through this slides of geometry. I'm sure that we're not even to the real meat of this meal yet.
Nowhere near it. Yeah. Okay, so this is just how the corners, when you have 3 cubes, the corners all nestle, and that gives you the 888. So another sort of reference, and we'll see how these references play into music a little bit later, based on the 3 different means. So if you want to look at Jesus's name, again, you break it down in the Greek gematria, which is nearly all of this stuff that's in this slideshow is based on the Greek gematria. And you'll see that the 666 is the ratio of the perfect fifth, while the 888 is the ratio of the whole tone. And it's the whole tone that builds the scale.
Yeah. Do you have any way to expand on this idea and help us non-musical theory experts, George?
Sure. The typical major scale that we use, the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, that everyone's familiar with, is constructed of whole and half steps or whole tones. And these are also known as major and minor seconds. Picture on a fretboard, if you go 1 fret, it's a half step. If you go 2 frets, it's a whole step. So you get a succession of half and whole steps. You get 3 whole steps followed by a half step. Then you get another 4 whole steps followed by another half step. So this is the intervallic structure of a musical scale. And where the half steps are is what matters the most, because it's primarily whole steps. So when you know where your half steps are, you kind of know what scale you're in as a result of that. Once you get better at understanding the way the scales work. That's just a quick overview of what these numbers are meaning here, because the 5th is very important. It's not necessarily the center. We'll talk about what the real center is soon, but when you get to 5 and you treat that as a harmony, when you put the chord that belongs there, that is what gives us the amount of dissonance and what the scale kind of almost requires it to resolve itself when we get to the 5th. So that's why the 5th is an important thing to mention here. And it happens to be 666, which we've already seen like 8 different times here. So that's going to start coming up a lot for sure.
I find it interesting too how the 888 is going to have 8 plus 8 plus 8. That as just simple addition becomes 24. And there's your 24 HRSs of a day, which would be like a whole tone, if you could consider the day to be like a whole tone. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is much of the same thing. We could probably race through this one and get to the next one, which is probably going to explain to people a little bit better how this sort of works with the keyboard. But generally, this is just, again, the harmonic ratios and why these are important. You can see.
I'm glad, because I was wondering how you could, like, what whole numbers you could divide to derive the 8888. So
yeah, it actually comes about because of those sort of 3 sisters that we were initially talking about, or the 3 pillars, which is they are representatives of 3 different types of means. One's a arithmetic mean, one's a geometric mean, and one's a harmonic mean. And so they those 3 women, if you like, the 3 seasons, all derive their power from that singular godhead, if you like. And usually it comes in the form, like where they come from is from law itself. So there's certain laws that are in place, geometric laws, laws of harmony, and they are released from that. And you'll see that they are actually derived from the vesica as well. You can have them as masculine or feminine, but usually they're the hori that are the three of them. So
Yeah. So the HAG, we've said this before, but that's they're the hags. And, so many times, like, I don't know whose culture is trying to cast shade on who, but, the HAG of harmony, arithmetic, and geometry are often like vilified or made scary or evil and into scary kids stories. But we also know about Hecate having the triune aspect there as well. So these could be the three faces of wisdom.
yeah, exactly. That's what they are. They're sort of part of the wisdom idea for sure. And that's really interesting. You put it hag. I never thought of that. That's crazy.
Right. That's the heart attack gun. Goes back to Frank Church holding up the heart attack gun, HAG, and scaring the shit out of the masses so everybody gets the message delivered with no postage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. Well, hag is sage, philologically, especially because a lot of the ancient languages, the S, if there was an S, it could be a sound like a snake, of course, and it could also be like hagia is it's that ag. First of all, is like the ach of Nakash. There's that, and then basically, if an S can also be a shush or an oris sound, so now you're like shag or sag, shin or sin. It goes like that. There's it kind of interchangeability there. Just like depends on who is the one pronouncing it, whether they're going to do the shush or the s sound. So if you have a shag, it's not far to just kind of drop the aspirate and make it hag. So there's a lot of
shag
is
a bird as well, which is interesting.
Oh.
And hagia was one of the epithets of Sophia.
Man, okay. This reminds
me
of the
mother of monsters, by the way.
Yeah.
Right.
This reminds me of during the Crusades, there was a certain word that they would test people to see how they would pronounce it. And if they pronounced it a certain way, and if they were able to pronounce it to the, and according to the new reset, then they were allowed to survive. That comes to mind. And I think it did have to do with the way they pronounced the S. It was like a reveal of the roots of where they were from. That's pretty crazy. And it turned into ethnic cleansing at some point. That's so wild.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like maybe your Shemites versus your Semites. Because Semites are referring to people who claim to be descended from Shem. So just right there, you have the S versus shush, Okay, that's dangerous territory, though. Let's get on to the next slide. I already said a word the algos are probably looking out for.
So I should mention that a lot of this material comes from this book called Jesus Christ, Son of God. So I can't take credit for hardly any of it. And it's by David Fiddler. Highly recommend everyone get hold of this book and go through it, because I'm only really just touching on some of the stuff in here, and he goes into much greater detail. It is just brilliant. I've been studying this book for the last few months and still don't think I've understood a quarter of it, but it's deep. But so this is the harmony of Apollo, and you can see how you have these two types of means, the harmonic mean and the arithmetic mean, and they're just done a different way. One's sort of like counting as you would normally, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that way, and the harmonic mean is almost like a times tables or a dividing. So you can see that these this is how the keyboard's broken in. You have a 6 and a 12, which would represent the lower C and the higher C, and I should let George speak about this more than me, but you can, as this creates the fifth and the fourth through the 8 and the 9, and how it's divided up through that 12. But I'll let George sort of explain it better than me.
I think that maybe the best thing for people that have a little experience with music, or if you have none at all, the most important thing here, as far as the relationship that comes out of it, is that you see there's fourths and there's fifths, and then there's one tone, what would be called a whole tone, like we were saying earlier, right in the middle. And this is what happens when we invert something. Musical intervals can be inverted. So fourths can become fifths and vice versa. They invert into each other. And when we discuss fourths and fifths, we actually call them perfect. And it's the only interval that we call perfect in, the musical system that we use. And I think this is why. When you get to the fourth, you're a fifth away from the octave. When you get to the fifth, you're a fourth away from the octave. So I hope that kind of helps you picture it visually. But when we use the rule of 9, we get our inversions. 9 minus 4 is 5. 9 minus 5 is 4. A seventh can be a second. 9 minus 7 is 2. So inversions are a very big deal, musically speaking, because something that sounds a certain way going up musically can actually sound a little different going down. The direction of the interval matters. So that's why this nice little symmetry exists here. And I think, again, that's why we might call them perfect. Because when you get to the fourth and you use it as its harmony, we get something called the predominant. When you get to the fifth, we call that the dominant. And like I was saying earlier, when you hit the fifth, when you hit G from C, that is the chord that wants to go back home to C again. And I think when we see more of the diagrams that are coming, we can get a little more of a detail on it. But think of it this way. The path of harmony in music, not to say that it's required, but what is naturally expected of a scale, a key signature, or we'll just call it a key maybe, is that we get from 1, we go to 4, we go to 5, and then we get back to 1 again. Just like with the Horai, we have the seasons. We go through all 3, what used to be 3 seasons, and then we start over again. We do the same thing. And musically, we get that same experience. And here you can see that there's a fourth on either side, technically speaking, and there's a whole tone in between the fourth and the fifth is something that we're going to start discussing in some of his later slides.
Oh, I see it now. Wow. Thank you so much for that.
Cool.
That is really neat. Oh, so 4 and 5 are at the base of the Enneagram. They're like the foundation. And 4 is, I've plugged Aphrodite in there. And it makes me think of she's the prima donna, the predominant, the prima donna. Number 4 is she's beautiful. She's let me think. She's the individual, and her shadow is envy. But that's Aphrodite, and it's cool because she's like a prima donna, and you're talking about predominant.
If you put her as the fourth, it's got 4 in her name, Aphrodite.
Awesome.
Oh,
man.
Isn't it funny how it's just like right in front of our face sometimes? That just jumped out at me.
And keep in mind too, we often use Roman numerals. So we would see, Roman numeral 1 for our tonic, and then we would get Roman numeral 4, Roman numeral 5 for the predominant and the dominant. So that may end up turning into something. We'll see. I'm not sure.
Yes. Oh, wow. That is super cool. So, and then number 5 next to her is Hermes, the observer. And they interact in a very interesting way. They're like, because Hermes is always flirting with her. He wants to get with her. He walks behind her, and he's always smiling because he's walking behind her. He's admiring her from behind. So their flirtatious relationship seems to be at play with these numbers in a really fun way.
It does. That's incredible. And technically speaking, we usually use triads when we talk about these harmonies, but the triad, we use a little more than a triad on the 5. When we get to 5, the dominant, we're supposed to use what's called the 7th chord. Now we have 4 different notes. And that 4th note, that special added note beyond the triad, is the note that is the 4th, F in this scenario. So they do sort of commingle in order to make the dissonance that's required to go back home. So that adds to what you're saying, definitely.
Fun. This is great.
This is cool.
So again, we'll sort of speak about these fourth and the fifth, and again, it's from that book. But Pythagorean philosophy is primarily concerned with the problem of mediation between extremes via the principle of ratio, logos, or proportions. The result is harmonia, a fitting together. In the case of the musical scale, the two extremes which must be united are the octave, the 1 and the 2, the interval from the low C to the high C. The arithmetic mean between the two extremes is the perfect fifth, while the harmonic mean between the 1 and the 2 is the perfect fourth. These ratios and relations are shown above in terms of string lengths.
Cool. Yeah. It's, more of the same, but in a different, a different way to look at it. And this just speaks to that perfect thing again. It's clear why the fourth and the fifth are perfect, and everything else is a major or a minor interval. They don't have as much clout. So this is the royalty of the scale, in case that makes us think of anything else. I always say from C to shining C to the students.
Nice. I love that. Oh, Aphrodite, she turned into a fish, a silver-footed fish, or Silverfoot is a nickname, and she she changed into a fish when Typhon came. Hermes became the stork, but that is cool.
And start thinking about Triton. He may end up. There might have something.
Yeah,
might have something to do.
We're going to look at the medium between the fourth and the fifth, which we can sort of get to as the fourth is related to the moon, while the fifth is related to the sun. The perfect fourth and the perfect fifth represent the harmonic and arithmetic forms of the mediation between the two extremes of the octave in musical tuning theory. They are the most powerful music intervals and form the underlying basic for harmonic progression in all forms of music. The various relations shown above between the primary harmonic ratios being out the numbers of Apollo, the Greek god of music, Hermes, the inventor of Apollo's lyre, Jesus, the Christian personification of the solar logos, and Olin, Apollo's first prophet and the founder of the oracle at Delphi. The above relationships show that the numbers 1415, 1061, 707, and 888 are intimately related. They are, in fact, mathematical variations upon a single harmonic theme. The so-called musical proportion discovered by Pythagoras, the underlying foundation of the musical scale. So essentially, what we're looking at here is that the gematria values of the names of Apollo, the god Hermes, the god Apollo, Jesus or Olin, and those and their equivalents are basically detailing where they are geometrically. They're geometrical names to help you understand where they are musically and how they relate to each other. So the values came first geometrically, and the names are then applied secondarily. So you work out a name based on the numbers that you have.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Oh, there's so much. Okay, you guys just got to take my word for it because I don't have time to fill in how I got here. But Obi-Wan Kenobi is a 4 in the Enneagram, and I'm going through Star Wars right now. So just I'm not trying to derail, but when I was watching Star Wars, the scene where he says, "These are not the droids you're looking for. Please move along." I am quite convinced that is implying that there's gematriological encodes to our language that can be used like a password to get what you want, if that makes sense. I think that might have been part of what that force mind control trick that he was doing might have been implying.
I'm just wondering how the numbers here are derived in terms of being attached to these specific names.
They're derived through the geometric and arithmetic means. those three things, and we'll get to that. There's slides coming up that show how they actually relate to each note and how they're actually derived. So, yeah,
Very
the
good.
other, yeah, I'll hopefully get to it again. It's all in this book that people should really have a look at if they want to get into a really in-depth look at it. But you'll see that Hermes and Apollo, the two Greek gods of music, are brothers, the sons of Zeus. Hermes invented the tortoiseshell lyre, which is offered to Apollo in reconciliation after stealing 50 of Apollo's prize cattle. Since wily Hermes made up for the theft, Apollo gave him the caduceus, another symbol of harmony in a gesture of friendship. These relations between the two divinities may be represented mathematically through the harmony and geometric principles of mediation which underlie the structure of musical scale. In the equation below, we take Hermes, which has a value of 353, and Apollo 1061 to represent the extremes to be harmonized. It is then discovered that the geometric mean between Hermes and Apollo is 612, Zeus, while the harmonic mean between the two is 531, Lyre. So again, you're seeing these names and the stories that interrelate with each other to tell you about geometry and music.
These are definitely the droids we're looking for, guys. Holy shit, that's awesome.
It's so amazing that the lyre is under the harmonic, equation. Of course it would be. When it works out like this, it's right. It's no denying it.
Wow. That's my daughter's name, Lyra. It's the English version of the lyre.
That's cool.
But she's very honest.
I was going to say, lyra is better than being a lyra is better than being a liar.
Yeah.
And now you know she's part of the harmonic mean. Brings harmony.
That's great.
Yeah, this is really cool. This makes me think too of how like sons of Zeus, right? There's hundreds probably. And one of the difficulties of looking back at the systems the ancients were utilizing, not just the fact that they were different regions had different versions of the same character, but then different time periods would have different versions of the same character. So like, it's kind of a tangent, but in Anacalypsis, Higgins talks about this, how Buddha is a age of Taurus version of the Son of God, Son, Krishna, age of Aries, Jesus, age of Pisces. And then in different regions, you'd have the same thing going on, that like the age of Taurus version was, man, I'm trying to remember who it was for Greek, but later, I think it was Bacchus was the first, and then the next was replaced by Hercules, right? So either way, there's like time layer depths too. So we're seeing this regenerating 3-in-1 God character also regenerating in the mythology at certain points in what we're told or taught is processional time. Then that is its own ball of wax to decide whether or not that's even happening. But tangents aside, we can move forward.
So this is some of the work that I did in preparation for the show, along with George helping me out. But what I did was apply the septenary cipher to the keyboard, and it has 13 steps. So it will go from a C to a C, and then you find out where the rest point is in the keyboard, and it turns out to be an F sharp, which is extremely important because it's sort of both sides of the fourth and the fifth, as we were talking about before. So it's the mediator between the sun and the moon, in a sense. And when you pull the white keys out and the black keys out, you actually get a series of numbers just based on the cipher itself. The white keys will total a 28, and the black keys will total 21. And you can see they are both divisible by 7, the 7 notes. and you will get this 4/3 sort of a perfect fourth ratio that comes out of it, and it's the 7th triangular number and the 6th triangular number. So I found this application of the septenary cipher to the keyboard just really, really fascinating to go into. And you'll see that it actually lines up the rest point, the G and the T, and the 7 actually line up with this mercurial character as well, the Apollo.
That's
I feel
very
like
cool.
we need George to weigh in.
There's a few things that pop up here, interestingly enough, and the first thing is that I don't know why I'm ever surprised by anything anymore, but the fact that this turns into, the perfect fourth as the 4 divided by 3, and that's crazy in itself, right? And we also have the trivium quadrivium, just happens to be a reference there. Maybe it's unintentional, who knows? But the other part of it is that, again, we have this 28. And that, again, like I said, that really means an octave. There's a lot of ways to see an octave beyond one octave. We really only need one octave to study. But once we start maybe discussing the overtone series and how it provides a very different sounding, what we would call a scale, I guess, versus equal temperament, we're using the equal temperament keyboard here to come up with numbers that are proving potentially that we are using the wrong tools to make the music that we have. So those are some of the things I'm thinking about here, because it also has to do with our alphabet. I was talking to Lucas about it, where Alvin Boyd Kuhn, The Esoteric Structure of the Alphabet, this really great book, which I also might flash a book here while we're at it. I highly suggest checking this book out if you haven't. It's pretty special. And he was talking about how the alphabet may have actually been structured to have motion, where you make your way down to M, you come up back to Z again. And that may produce an analemma, by the way. I'm not sure if that might be something to think about for another day, perhaps. But we're using English here. And I think that's another major factor, because the 440 thing that we're kind of, pigeonholed into at this point, where even the string industry, the guitar string industry, is balancing their strings to have tension at 440. It's taken over the entire musical world that we have. It's no coincidence that we're able to use the English language to get this connection to the keyboard, because the keyboard has equal temperament. That's kind of a bastardization of music as it is, and then the English language, with all of its extra stuff that we may or may not need, it happens to line up with this. And I just find those coincidences to be pretty stunning. It's pretty interesting. And I guess last but not least, we were just talking about fourths and fifths. If you now, to the layman, if you want to look at this keyboard here, if you go from C, you get C, D, E, F. There's your 4. And then if you go from G, G, A, B, C, and there's your other 4. So we get a fourth in both directions from what is essentially a center point. And you'll notice that there's a black key in between F and G. And again, as Lucas said, as I said, we'll be discussing F sharp for sure, and discussing exactly what it means and why it's going to be so impactful for our conversation. We're not even there yet.
Next slide.
Not even there yet.
Coming up right next is the next one.
Oh, okay, cool.
Oh, all right.
So the F sharp, which is in between the 4th and the 5th, the center of this keyboard, the G, the rest point, is the tritone. And just by the name itself, we have the 3, the 1, and the tau. So it's telling us about a tau is 2 pi. It's telling about the vesica. We also have tritone here, which is related to the geometric mean, which is 0.888. So again, we're seeing that 888 encode. The harmonic mean is the perfect fourth. The arithmetic mean is the perfect fifth. So tritone, how many gods hold a trident? But we'll go to the next slide, because that goes into the trident and Triton, which is a god in himself. And again, it's just really a mercurial figure, showing the same sort of symbolism as Abraxas, actually, which again is like the Apollo, that the world gnomon. So yeah, son of Poseidon, Aphrodite.
Right. It's
You know,
got
those
that
sort of things.
the 3 to 1. The 3 into 1 is kind of what that is saying. And from one of my recent digs on King Charles, his little cipher, the RC cipher, it's really powerfully indicated that he's holding the trident. The RC is a 93, 93rd periodic element is Neptunium. So he's holding that symbol, and there will be a lot of psyops being attributed to his influence. We'll just leave it at that.
George, you want to talk about the tritone and why
Sure.
it's sort of is what it is?
Yeah, it's such an interesting and heavily it's actually a debated topic, which I didn't expect. Looking into all the research I have been over the decades, I've been thinking about what a tritone is, how it functions, what it does. But the most important thing to
George, the Greek tritone, as it's spelled here with the omega as the second to last letter, is
Right.
pronounced exactly like we spell tritone. Like, people will look at this and be like, it's triton.
Oh, right. I see what you
The
mean.
Greeks would have been saying maybe something more like tritone.
Yeah, tritone, I think they would be saying. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're right. That's exactly right.
Find that interesting.
No,
Because you have
beautiful.
tree in it. He's the son of Poseidon. Po is one of the ancient names for Buddha. And then Don means Lord. And then Psi means the mind. So Poseidon could be like the first mind. And then the mediator character is usually the trying to remember the exact term. It was like Deus Nous or something, the second mind. So anyway,
cool.
Triton sounds like tritone sounds like he's the mediator of whatever cultures worshipped him, or whatever people's, there's these trinities all the way around everywhere you go. Trinities.
It's just about everywhere in everything, whether it's a myth or not. Yeah, I agree with that completely. And the tritone in music, and shout out to that awesome episode you had with Mario, because that image of chaos actually reminded me of how important the tritone was, because you guys pointed out that there were 6 circles and each one of them was a pair of zodiac symbols, but they were the ones that were across the wheel, and every single one of those pairs musically is a tritone, actually, because that's how we see it on this musical wheel. For example, we're going to be talking about C. We're always going to be talking about C, F, and G. And what's in between F and G is F sharp. The tritone we're going to be discussing is C all the way across the wheel to F sharp, straight line. So it's already impactful visually, but musically speaking, tritones are technically the most dissonant thing you can do with only 2 notes. And if you put 2 very close notes together, they're not that close, actually. A tritone is 3 whole steps. That's why it's called a tritone, musically speaking. It's 3 whole steps away. And because if you recall, I said you get 2 whole steps and a half step in a major scale. So a third whole step actually brings you just 1 fret or 1 piano key higher to this tritone. And when you only play 2 different notes, as actually with the episode chance that we had, I played 2 notes, it sounded major. I added a third note lower, and then it sounded minor all of a sudden. You do need 3 notes for a full chordal context. But with a tritone, only 2 notes can produce a very dissonant and almost, it's hard to say. When I say dissonance, I think people think that maybe it sounds bad, like it's a bad sounding thing, but they're not that close. If you play 1 note that's only a half step away from another note, those 2 notes are going to clash heavily because they're so similar. There must be some kind of, polar or some other shift in the way that they sound. But with a tritone, there's dissonance, and this dissonance has purpose. It's dissonance that creates motion, as if the wheel is moving because of this tritone. And as a result of a tritone, your ear, whether you're musically trained or not, your ear is actually going to expect to hear something after you play a tritone. And in music, the tritone is 100% an identifier of what key that you're in, whether it's C major, A flat major. Each key only has one unique tritone. So that's a good summary kind of platform for us to start thinking about what the tritone is and how it works musically speaking. It's a big deal in music.
And you just said that the note and a half note away from each other are going to sound really dissonant and clash a lot, right?
Right. That's uglier sounding than, uglier, like more bad sounding than this, which is also dissonant, but it has a purpose to the sound.
It almost makes me, well, it does actually make me think of how people get more pissed off about things that are different with people who are very close to them.
Yeah.
Like you might not get, like people might not really care at all, someone who's on the other side of the world in a different culture and they have completely different values, but your family member who has 99% the same values, but they're doing one thing you don't like, and you're just like, this annoys me more than anything in the entire world.
I have seen that happen for sure. Wow. That's interesting.
Okay, so out of the vesica, we get these values, which are the square root of 2, the square root of 5, the square root of 3. So very important. I just want to show that these things here are what's setting up how we find this mediation between two points. All right, next one, Chance, please. Again, out of the vesica, we can also get the phi ratio, which is pretty interesting. The way this is done, it actually builds the sign symbol for Aries, and that's related to the phi. And again, we're showing this link between the names Hermes, Zeus, and Apollo, and showing in terms of plane geometry or length that Apollo, Zeus, and Hermes are linked together through the ratio of the vesica Pisces, the square root of 3, and how Zeus is a geometric mean between Apollo and Hermes. So it's just another way of showing that the names of these gods in gematria actually show very significant geometric relationships.
Wow. This makes me think of how the story of, Hermes stole Apollo's cows and then Zeus has to come and play mediator. It's like, it's almost, and they a full retelling of the story. And it's almost like they're, and there's even a witness, there's a farmer who is the witness to the crimes. So it's almost like the origin of court. It has all the dynamics of like Zeus is the judge, Apollo's the plaintiff, Hermes is the defendant, and he tries to. There's all the ingredients of somebody going on trial. And Hermes is guilty, but he still gets off, and he gets a reward in the end, even though he's guilty. So it has a very unexpected kind of twist.
To me, they seem like geometrical riddles. And then they've sort of maybe lost context through time, whether it's been a retelling that's been incorrect or using different spellings or whatever it is. But they're basically trying to show these geometrical riddles, and you're supposed to basically be able to unfurl them and follow along with them as, like a teaching tool. But I think some of them have been very misconstrued and lost along the way.
Oh yeah. Every iteration, every generation of the priesthood tended to lose more and more of the actual Kabbalah of what because they weren't allowed to write that down, and things that they were writing down would get changed all the time. But I just wanted to point out Apollo, which is in septenary gematria a 12. It's like A is 1, P is 3, and then OLLO are all 2s. So if you were to do the P to B switch, because P and B switch a lot between languages, and then vowels are always pretty much interchangeable. But if you were trying to swap P to the V, but then keep the overall total sum 12, then you would switch the A to an O. And obolo is still equaling 12, but numerically it's 222222. And I thought that was interesting.
Oh, wow. That is really interesting. And I think that's where some of these names did sort of have their different spellings depending on what they were trying to use it for. But you can see we can sort of restore a lot of this information just by understanding music and the ratios and these geometric and harmonic means. So it's not like it's totally lost. So this one we're going to get into the root of 2, which is a really significant number. Again, these like are transcendental numbers like pi in that they keep going. They never stop. And this one's just, again, comes out of the vesica, but we're going to see that the root 2, the square root of 2 is very important to this overall relationship and logos idea. So according to Pythagoras, the polarities of existence are represented by the number 1 and 2, symbolizing unity and multiplicity respectively. Therefore, the ideal logos of mediation between these extremes is the square root of 2, the geometric mean, which unites the extremes together in one continuous proportion and represents the ideal harmony of the universe. That is why the name of Apollo and Hermes, the logos personified, were derived from this central value. And this is where you have the square root of 2, and then you divide it into 4 segments, and you'll get all these different sort of values out of it that relate to names of which is basically like you have a square root of 2 times 1,000 will give you the god Apollo or the god Pythos. And so if you do a third of that, you'll get Apollo, Pythos. You do a half of that, you'll get the god Hermes. You do a quarter of that, and the god and Hermes will turn up. So it's just mathematics through name, basically.
Yeah.
And you'll see why this is important as we go on. This will relate to music. By dividing the square root of 2 into 4 parts, we arrive at the simple arithmetic progression, which give you all those names. Hermes being 707 are reciprocals of one another, of the 1.415 of 0.707 equals 1, underscoring the fact that they are brothers of one another in Greek mythology. Interestingly, we can see from this material that we are not dealing with concrete numbers as much as we are dealing with functions or powers, which is how the nature of the gods we envisaged by the learned minds of old. From these central values of Hermes and Apollo, which represent aspects of the ideal logos, many of the other key geometrical values are mathematically derived. Several of these are listed in the figure 19. Other gematria values were derived from the ratios of music or other important. So that's cut off there, but you get the idea that these the square root of 2 is very important to how the names are built and then how they interact. We can sort of run past this, but you can see the god Apollo, the god Hermes, Jesus, fishes and the net are a geometric mean and unison between the arithmetic mean. So again, relating to music. Yep. Next.
So 14,
so these are coming
15,
from doing that square root again, square root times a certain fraction and then times 1,000.
Yes, that's right. So what you do is basically draw the vesica, and then from that you can derive the square root of 2, and it's really by applying Pythagoras' theorem to it, to a triangle that comes out of it. and you'll derive the square root of 2, the square root of 3, and the square root of 5, and these are the transcendental sort of numbers that form on these triangles that come out of the vesica.
Wow. So 1415 is N and an O. It spells no. And all of this geometry is in an O. It comes out of the nature of the O. It's in the circle.
That's cool. That's cool. And it's also worth mentioning because I think it popped up before, but it's good to remind because it's a lot of stuff, is that 707.707 is really the best way for us to look at the tritone interval. And 888 is a good way to look at the major second interval, which is between 4 and 5, between F and G. There's a major second. So these are 100% relating to what we've been discussing so far. On top of all that.
So these diagrams here will show this relationship between the C, the F, and the G, which is the fourth, the fifth, and then the geometric mean between the G and the F, which is the F sharp, the tritone, is that axis of harmonic symmetry. And so that's that center dotted line in that triangle. And so the 9 is the arithmetic mean, and the 8 is the harmonic mean. So the G and the F, and this is just showing this relationship between these notes of the piano. And it's expressed in different ways, depending if you use decimal or on how you are actually expressing it in number value. So those previous God's names, you'll see that they'll actually link up to this arithmetic harmonic, these sort of 3 chords here. Okay, we can skip through these like pretty quick, just to show people. So you get this relationship between what would be the G and the F sharp is going to give you that 1.01, which is going to relate to a God's name. The axis of harmonic symmetry, the GM line, is going to relate to 0.888, and so on and so forth. So you're seeing this relationship between the frequencies, between the notes. Again, 666, 707, 750, and it's just showing us.
Wow. Can we go back 2 slides? This is like, I can't wait. I'm going to be watching this for an entire week over and over on repeat. I might fill out the rest of my notebook with this. When 9 in the Enneagram, a 9 is slothful. It's the balance point. It's and these are personality traits that we attribute to humans, but I think that there's way more truth behind that other than just personality dynamics. So number 9 is slothful or balanced. And then an 8 is a challenger. So 9 is like Yoda, and 8 is Darth Vader. Darth Vader, right? But I want to point out that Vader is a harm maniac. He's a harm maniac. And so he's an 8, which is harmonic that you're saying here. And in 9 being slothful or balanced, math by nature requires a balance. And it's unalterable. It's slothful. It can't be changed. So I'm finding like really deep emotional puns hidden inside of these numeric values. And there's so much more to that than just what I'm saying here. But I just love what you're putting down here.
Yep. So this is the 3 means sort of interact with each other. The 3 seasons or the 3 pillars interact with each other, and it has this 3/2, 4/3 relationship, and you have this arithmetic mean, the perfect fifth, the tritone, which is the geometric mean, the harmonic mean, which is the perfect fourth. So these are your 3 sort of, and they're all coming down or born out of this sea. Come from the sea. Again, so when we place this to other sort of architectural stuff, what we get is the Doric, the Ionic, and the Corinthian. And so this is what I was applying this to these sort of other sort of measurement systems. And so again, we're having the 3 seasons, but we'll also have these 3 elements and the 3 goddesses. Do you want to say anything more on this, George?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. This is what I was saying, way earlier. Remember, 3 is not just triads for chords, but we have a set of 3 chords that we expect in a key, and that is what ends up bringing us right back home to start it all over again. The path of the symphony, I guess you can call it, because there's a certain way that things get to their most dissonant point, and then they have to resolve. Just like the wheel of the year, it's the same thing. And we also look at the way we write symphonies in something called sonata form, and it relates in a similar way. We have 3 sections. We have the exposition, the development, and the recapitulation. And then, of course, it brings us back home. We start over again. So this idea that, we have 3 different, whatever you want to call them, and it's part of a cycle that has to reset. This exists in music because, of course, we are actually manipulating the perception of time when we play music. We can play slow or fast. And if the listener knows the song or melody, you can change their perception of time. You can push and pull on the speed of a melody. So if someone's familiar with it, they'll expect a certain speed, and you can actually play with that. So that's always an interesting concept to me, for sure. But what's even more interesting is that I've been hearing these words Ionian, Dorian for a very long time. They're part of what we know as the modes, which is essentially a scale played from a different note other than 1, and then you play from that note's octave. So let's say you're in C major, but you play from D to D. You would get something called the Dorian mode. So these names have always been on my mind, and what we're really finding here, and I like now that instead of what we earlier had the eyeball, what looked like the eyeball diagram. Now we have the base of the triangle at the bottom. This could look like a flat plane with a dome above it, perhaps. But more importantly, it could look like an ionic pillar right in the center of everything, holding it all up, holding it all together. And the other thing that it functions as is something of a bridge or a mediator between F and G. And if you were to play that F sharp after an F or a G, let's say you played F sharp, your ear would need to go to G. If you played G F sharp, your ear would need to go to F. It has to go in either direction. So even though C is not part of that functioning, it is C and F sharp connected as a tritone does create this idea of this pillar. And it's so interesting that the designs of these ancient pillars has a similar name to the concept. It's just proving again that not only are you finding that we've got gematria making myths, but we have architecture doing the same thing in a certain way.
And Frozen music, they weren't kidding about that. They mean it literally.
Yep. Yeah. And if anyone's familiar with the galvanic application or application to a battery to our world, then you'll see that the ionic, and I actually call it an ionic bridge, is this movement or energy between the sun and the moon. So in this sort of layout, the Doric becomes lunar, the Corinthian becomes solar, and
it's even Corinthian core is the heart, like core, car, cardio.
So and it lines up with your Masonic sort of ideas as well, right? Where you have the 3 pillars, or maybe 2 pillars with a staircase in between, and then you'll have usually the northern symbolism in the center, and then you'll have a sun and the moon, or the eye of providence is over the top, which is sometimes found in the center of the zodiac as well.
Nice. So I stumbled upon the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian when researching the word order. It's a very long definition in my 1961 Webster's. It included the 9 heavenly realms. It included secret societies such as the Templars, and then it dropped these 3 different pillars. And I've always been just kind of fascinated with how much meaning there is behind the word order. And then you look up the word chaos, and it's like one sentence. But I want to point out that, help me out here, George. Did you say exhibition, development, recapitulation?
That's correct. It's
So
called
that's a,
sonata form.
what's that?
It's called sonata form. It's like a symphonic form.
It's not a form, man. So that's it's an EDR, and the word order has the DER in the word order. So I'm wondering if the exhibition, development, recapitulation has an acronym value to the ORDER. If there's a there. I'm just saying, we're
I
talking.
wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah,
It's one of those
also,
things where it's a translation. It was definitely studied in a German or Latin first,
okay.
So I don't know, but that sounds very, very accurate.
Yeah, and so it also EDR. Now, do they have to always be in that order? Exhibition
This is
first.
absolutely the order, no questions asked. Yep.
Okay, that's crucial because in certain blood sacrifice holidays, blood must be splashed on the pillar. So we have red is RED.
Right.
It must be splashed onto a pillar. And so I'm just thinking about the EDR and the RED and its relationship to the pillar in certain rituals. Just a thought. It's almost like if it has to be an EDR in that order every time, no matter what, then by splashing RED on a pillar, you're defiling order. It could be a chaos spell.
That's an incredible analogy for that. I sounds pretty solid, man. Sounds pretty solid to me. That's great.
I mean, even the very idea of blood sacrifice is a chaos idea because nature doesn't kill things needlessly for the most part.
Right.
That's not really part of the order of things.
Right.
There are exceptions, I'm sure, but generally, the blood sacrifice idea is a pretty out there plan, and it's not. Maybe it is against the divine order. Maybe it is invoking chaos. That's a really good point.
Yeah, the words red heifer. You flip those around and you get heifered, afraid. Heifer red, afraid.
It's interesting. I know you've said this before, Chance, about nature not being sort of minusing, not having the minus. Well, you sort of see the same thing with these 3 different means. One's about timesing, one's about dividing, and one's about adding. But there's no minusing. It's always you can divide something up, but it never gets taken away. There's nothing whatever's here is here. And I think that's a really interesting concept that sort of showed itself as I was looking at these things.
Yeah, man, that's part of the destroyer regenerator thing in the Trinity, that there isn't pure destruction. There's only changing of forms and the becoming of a regeneration. Yeah. Yeah, you could have 5 apples, but you can't have -5 apples. There's no such thing as -5 apples.
Yeah, you can't take away from.
It's like that Hermetic opposites law. There's not really opposites. There's the one thing and the degree of that thing, how much of it there is. There's no such thing as cold. There's just how warm or less warm, right?
Yeah, they're the gradient. Yep, coming from one. Yep. So from that sort of structure, what I did is basically started to apply it to the Zodiac in my own way. And this is just me sort of working out these sort of ideas. I like to play with visuals. And as you can see, I've got the 12 notes that are around, and instead of having 13, the 2 C's sort of come back on each other. So it comes back to the 1 C. And I initially put this, the tritone and the prime, or the octave, I put them as the solstices. I actually changed that later on, but you can see the 4th and the 5th have a relationship to the sun and the moon here. And when you put the septenary cipher around this 12 notes, you get this 7 and 11 that show up, which is really interesting because that's actually a ratio that comes out of the Vesica as well, obviously, but its relationship for the Great Pyramid, which has a 7 height to 11 base. So just something interesting. And when you break these, when you add the 4th and the 5th, you get a 9. When you get a major 3rd and a minor 6, you get a 9. And this sort of types of 9s resolve themselves all the way through when you lay it out like this. Also, what I did was, when you have a major or a minor, I put them as masculine and feminine. You'll see why in a little bit, and why that is. And they can be, it's a really interesting concept in itself, that these minor and major are masculine and feminine. But
George, you have any thoughts on this?
I think what I'll add for the moment is that there's even more to it than that at the end musically, because an interval itself, yes, or a chord, let's say, can be major or minor, but within that chord, there are 2 thirds, 2 intervals of a third, 2 different thirds usually. One is a major third, one is a minor third. It depends on the order. If the first is a major third, you get a major chord. If the first is a minor third, you get a minor chord. But every major or minor masculine or feminine chord has one of each inside of it already. So we're already back to some more Hermetic principles too.
Man, this is cool. You guys probably already saw that there's the the Star Trek logo in there,
Right.
with the vector.
okay.
And I know I keep throwing things into like weird places, but rewatching the Star Wars series from the beginning, the scene where they go into the bar and the music starts to play with the crazy aliens everywhere. The very first alien they focus in on, he has a vector-shaped head. He's got like a very, that V shape that we got here. And when I saw it, my mind went straight to Capricorn, because the shape of the constellation of Capricorn looks just like that guy's head. But now I'm seeing that it is also encoding, it's the musical, it's like, let the music begin. This is really cool.
I was thinking about the lyre also, which could be to the 7 and 11 ratio. The lyre would have 7 strings or 11, but mythologically it's 7 because Hermes was basing that off of the 7 daughters of Atlas, which is interesting too. If Mario's still here listening, 7 daughters of Atlas. Atlas is holding up the sky. He's like the tent pole, and his 7 daughters, would that be Ursa Minor?
Or they're the 7 notes of the major scale.
Right.
So this is what George was sort of speaking about in regards to the 3 and the 9. And hopefully I got this chart correct this time, George.
No, it's looking pretty good to me, man. But it's the rule of inversion. Everything adds, or you end up subtracting yourself to 9. And this is where like the nerdy music part, comes in. You don't have to know it, of course, but there's major thirds and there's also minor thirds. And the same thing goes for sixths. The same thing goes for seconds and sevenths. And if you recall, the 4ths and the 5ths end up being perfect. So we don't necessarily, and you can see here, they don't have major or minor on them. It doesn't work that way. And now we can see it in a brand new light, with the anode, cathode, sun, moon thing. we can see that they don't get the major or minor designation, but they would still add to 9 no matter what. So it still happens. And it just relates to music in every direction. It's crazy. And I also see a V, and I'm always looking for a V because of the 5 chord that we always use.
You want me to move forward?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
So this is from some of my previous work when I applied the man, and I was trying to do measurements with the flower of life sort of stuff. So it was just a rough sketch. I thought I'd throw it in there, and I was trying to work out this how the chakra system would relate to the body in regards to that flower of life. So yeah, we'll move ahead and we'll see how I applied all of this together to come up with something which may or may not be correct, but it's interesting nonetheless. Now, speaking of the 3 different modalities or the 3 different means, I was looking at how light sort of has these sort of similar principles in a sense that you have the red, blue, and yellow is a type of creating different colors on the screen, and the other one's is like you add color, and the other one is you take away color. And this magenta, cyan, yellow is how you add colors to create more colors, whereas red, blue, and yellow, if you add more color, you actually get white, whereas you add more color to this one, you get black in the center, which is very interesting that these two is sort of like a polar opposite orientation. So just music and light seem to have a direct correspondence to me. And so I was playing with these 3 colors and how I would apply this to music.
This needs more investigating for sure. As I understand it, the magenta, cyan, yellow version is more useful for screens for that type of color, whereas red, blue, yellow is maybe what you'd use if you're going analog rather than digital and painting, right? So wonder what
I think it's the opposite. So if you're printing if you're printing a poster and you're using magenta, cyan, yellow, you can actually it'll print, say, magenta first and then a yellow, and then wherever they sort of build up in color, you'll actually get different colors. Whereas the red, blue, yellow is used for computer screens, and if you have the red on full, the yellow on full, and the blue on full, you actually get white. So they're very interesting. And sometimes when people design things on their computer using the red, blue, yellow, they go to print it out and it doesn't look the same because their printer is using the magenta, cyan, yellow system.
It's weird that yellow's in both. There's probably a reason for that.
Yeah. I see, can you go back, Chance? In the spaces where only 2 are touching, there's 3 examples. I see the mitre cap of the Pope, and you stack 3 of them on top of each other, and it makes the old Pope hat of the Abrahamic triune triumvirance.
That is awesome.
So again, I was playing around with how this the scales, the gematria, and how it lines up with the chakra system, and I ended up moving the tritone and the octave to the equinox because it was the midpoint between the day and the night, or the sun and the moon. And so this is the chart that I come up with, which I just found really interesting. And when you lay the cyan sort of color scheme, the cyan, magenta, and if you lay that over the top, well, the tritone becomes green. And I just found that really fascinating because it was sort of like depicting spring, and the yellow becomes the daytime, and the if you're looking at it as a clock, 24-hour clock, then the moon or the blue color becomes the night. And relating this to the
magenta would be like afternoon and evening.
Red into the purple, and then into the dark purple, into the sort of I found it a really fascinating way of sort of teaching myself in a sense. And so the tritone and green, automatically took me to, the heart chakra, which is between the 8 and the 9. So in this triangular layout, which is exactly where you see this, see the tritone turn up actually. And from the previous sort of work, I realized that the middle of the triangle, or the 13, was the solar plexus. And so that gave me a sort of schematic to lay out the colors in relation to the chakra system. And it's just sort of interesting that the C's end up being at the top and bottom of our system, which, I don't know, take it as what you will, but I just had a lot of fun trying to pull these systems together.
In like biofield tuning, people will use forks in the solar harmonic set and associate C with the root and C with the crown, but they don't go C, D, F, F sharp, G, A sharp, C. They just go C, D, F, G, A, B, and they're going from D being the sacral, so it's kind of like upside down to this. But I don't know if they have any math behind that. I have no idea. I think they're just trying to associate 7 chakras with 7 notes. But yeah, this is interesting.
One weird pattern that just jumps out to me is how CDC skips the throat chakra all the way down to the gut chakra, which is like I don't know. There's a lot of the immune, the powers of our immune. I am the moonity.
Immunity.
The immunity from the F to the F sharp to the G to the A. Just a thought.
No, that's interesting. And this isn't, it doesn't, on paper here, it's not any official scale, but that's not, we don't necessarily need that in this scenario, in this example. This makes a lot of sense to have F sharp be the middle fire. It's very interesting. And, grass is green on the other side too.
Yeah. I mean, either way, F is the heart in either system. And also in terms of how the body responds to sound, any coherent sound can assist any part of the body. So
I'm not saying it's completely right at all. I was just trying to
no. I'm just
bring
thinking about
color, music, the body, all into sort of some sort of relationship that we can look at. And I just find
there should be a logic to it. Yeah, I mean, correlations should have a logic, and they should mirror across all dimensions of the fractal. So this is, really interesting. I've never seen anyone attempt to actually justify why a system of notes to chakras ever was developed the way it is. I think it was sort of like the easy way in terms of why people do the solar harmonic version.
Right. But it's great that this is happening, because I've seen a lot of debate on which color is which note. And this is a much better argument than I've ever seen.
Oh, that is so cool. Okay, total sync. I mean, such a good sync. I was actually taking the major arcana of the Thoth deck and breaking it up into color groupings. And I'm wondering if I can find correspondence with the organization of the periodic table with some of the patterns I'm finding in the Thoth deck. And your colors that you're bringing out are the ones I found just before we started the show tonight. So this is like,
wow.
Yeah, there's high magics in the air, fellas.
Incredible.
So this one, again, talking with George and trying to understand these major and minor and how they operate. What I did was again had all the notes of the scale outlaid around a circle, and then I started to create the major and minor inside that circle. And what you'll notice, interestingly enough, is that one triangle, the major, is a 4-3-5, which is the 4-3-5 triangle is the Pythagorean triangle for one. And then you look at the minor and it's 3-4-5. So it's like there's a mirroring going on. It's just an orientation between the masculine and the feminine. And I just found that really just really powerful in its way. It's sort of mirrored like that and still expressed that trinity.
Yeah, and this can actually be used for budding music theorists. They can easily see, at the very least, both of these have C and G. The only difference is the middle tone, the third, in other words. And if you spelled the D sharp as an E flat, which is totally the same, they're called enharmonic, same note, different spelling, that would be a black key, let's say. The black key in between D and E could either be D sharp or E flat. And the way we look at it typically is that we would see, C, E, G or C, E flat, G. We see that the third is flatted in a minor triad. But the 3 and the 4 here, much like the one we saw a while back, anytime you see 3, that's a minor third. All your 4s are major thirds. And now all of these 5s are perfect fifths. So you can, and I'm kind of seeing a bit of that, what they want you to see on the globe model, where to the right of the line that has a length of 5, there's way more real estate out there. It's almost like when you see certain parts of the globe, you just see nothing but ocean and maybe like one little island or something. And I'm kind of seeing that here. But this is a great way to study how chords look and how they're only one note difference between major and minor.
And so once I started, I kept going, and I filled in all
Weaving.
I basically started weaving. And so the major these are all the major chords lined up on top of each other, and you'll see that I've used the same color for each chord, and then the minor. And so after I looked at it for a while and sort of studied it, I could see that the major chord I can't really read that, it's a bit small for me, but I'll find it on my iPad here. For a major chord to be created requires 3 sides of the minor and vice versa. Yeah. So, I just found that really interesting that you had to create one minor chord, you had to use 3 different sides of a triangle and vice versa. So I just the way it was built is just really fascinating.
Yeah, can we maybe draw one out as an example here of a major chord and the 3 different sides of the minor? How, like, describe that with one specific example, and I'll hover my mouse over it.
It's hard to read, but
yeah,
let me see. I'll have a look on this.
Okay, cool.
My iPad. So there's what would that be? The D, the A, and the F sharp is one on the major, which is a sort of like a light green color.
Mm-hmm.
And to create that same F sharp, create that same sequence or triangle on this minor one, you have to go from the D to the A, which is a red, from the A to the F sharp, which is a yellow, and the F sharp to the D, which is a purple. So it takes 3 different colors to create the same pattern that would be on the major. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so like the major and minor, in a sense, their relationship to each other is like 3 becoming 1, 1 becoming 3.
Yeah.
On the other side of the mirror.
Yeah, it's a trinity. And if you're taking it as masculine, feminine, then one to create a masculine out of a feminine, you need like 3 different. Yeah, it's triplicities everywhere, but it's just interesting.
Yeah, it's cool. It speaks to the fact that a typical triad, major or minor triad, is not symmetrical, much like every scale is not technically symmetrical. That's the ones that we functionally use. There are symmetrical ones, and that's when the numerology kind of sneaks its way into composition and stuff, because they don't do what these chords typically do, these average normal chords. So that makes sense that you have to kind of turn the wheel a certain way to recalibrate, to get back. Recapitulation, we'll call it. And kind of recap your own chord.
So again, this is the string lengths. I don't know much about it. I just found it as I was looking for certain things. And now George will probably explain how the perfect fifth relates to the solar year. But this is basically what you would see in a flat Earth model, where you actually have the sun through the year, and this would be 6 months, moving inwards to the Tropic of Cancer, and then it would come out again and to the Tropic of Capricorn. So I just found this
So the wide
spiraling
circle, Tropic of Capricorn, equator, Cancer.
Yep. Right.
Yeah.
From out to in.
And we're just relating that sort of movement, that spiral movement, to harmony and
no,
vibration.
That makes that makes the whole flat Earth solar movement concept make more sense fractally if it mirrors the spiral of string length circle sizes. That's really cool.
Crazy, isn't it?
That's,
yeah. But
yeah.
You tell us, George. Tell us the one about the perfect fifths, man, because my world's been rocked since you said it. Basically,
it's nuts, man. It's nuts. They were measuring for instrument purposes, for just, I guess, turning this into pencil and paper as opposed to just actual physical music. They were taking what were called pure fifths. Now, when we use equal temperament, we get a 360-degree circle, like you would expect, I guess, before you actually study it. But this affects each interval. It kind of has to pull them in a little bit and take them away from their natural state of being. Now, how do we know what the natural state of being is the interesting part. Every pitch has an overtone series. The fundamental is the note you're playing. If you play an A, your fundamental is A. And then now you get an entire overtone series that exists inside of this one note, much like almost any color is a number of different colors and different amounts. Every note is every note, but their relation is different. So when we get a pure fifth, it's the fifth that we get in the overtone series. If you stack 12 of those, you come back home. And that circle is 365.04 degrees. So, and the year is supposed to be, 365.24. So when we stack the fifths we're supposed to get, we get closer to the amount of time we're supposed to get for a year, almost to the exact number, which is crazy. And we don't use them in our typical equal temperament system that we have now. Our 440 equal temperament life has completely removed us from the natural intervallic distance that is conscripted inside of each pitch's overtone series. I might have just said a lot, so I can repeat things, but it's crazy how far we've come.
No, yeah. Reiterate that, George. That is a really big point. And, maybe I'll throw into the mix of what I think maybe going on the length of a year isn't the same every time.
Interesting. And,
it'd be hard to pluck a string exactly the same vibration in the exact same spot more than once, It's like nature doesn't exactly do the same thing twice. It is close, but
right. But if you did know the adjustments through time, then you could be like David and play the chord that played so well it pleased the Lord.
Very nice. Very nice. I want to quickly mention too what this immediately makes me think of. If the numbers weren't there and I only saw the lines, I would be seeing music as it exists in my mind. The center would be the ionic pillar, or the one, or what we call the tonic. That's the note that the song is based on. We're in the key of C major, and everything else dances around it. Every other note that's available to you that is not the tonic, they all are technically dissonant. Every single one of them, once the key is established, they all want to come back home to that place of rest, the tonic, the ionic pillar. And that's what I see here. This is the nature of melody. This is the nature of harmony as well. Once you have the tonic established, everything wants to go back to it. And this is why minor sounds the way it does, is because minor is trying to sound like its major counterpart. Not only does every major chord have major and minor thirds, same thing for minor chords, there's a major and minor in it, but every major scale has a relative minor scale inside of it with the same exact set of notes. So when you play in minor, those notes are trying to sound like the major scale that it exists in. So even a major scale has major and minor in it. Side note on what I was discussing before. So when we have an overtone series created by playing any fundamental pitch, if you pluck the string for A, you hear A. Once you manipulate the overtone series, you can hear a fifth, a second, all the different intervals that exist in the overtone series. As the pitch goes up, it gets much higher from the fundamental. The fifth that exists there, it's actually the third overtone. We get an octave, the very next one is a fifth. This fifth is called a pure fifth. And if you stack 12 of them, and we're using the number 12 because there are 12 notes, if you stack 12 fifths, you come back to the beginning, and it makes a circle that's 365.04 degrees. So stacking pure fifths as it was meant to be gives us a circle that it resembles the year more than a perfect 360-degree circle. Does that sound better or worse of the explanation?
It's mind-blowing, man.
Hallelujah.
It just related that entire year as the perfect fifth, and that's what we've been saying, that the sun is related to the perfect fifth and the moon is related to the perfect fourth, and then you have the mediator in between, and it's a brilliant system.
Yes, it's incredible how we're seeing it now.
This is 365.04 or 0.05?
0.04.
So the word a year.
So here's something interesting. If you did that 7 times, then the decimal will bring us back to our 28.28.
Wow. And it's been there all along. This much higher octave. Yeah, a 28.
Say that again, Chance.
So if you did this 12 fifths for a year 7 times, then the fraction at the end, you're adding 365 or 360.04 7 times, right? The fraction at the end will be a 0.28, which is the 0.28 is the 4 sevens thing. It's the the fourth.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. So a quick note. YEAR. There's 5 a year, and it's ayar. And I believe ayar is to help or assist. I'm going to look that up, but that's Latin. I think it is to help, and it's like a helping hand. Let me look that up.
So the 7, when I was looking at the synodic times and dividing everything by 27, or using basically the synodic time of the moon as the basis for calculating the rest of the synodic times as if it was a harmonic. Right. Well, out of that came a lot of different, basically sevens, as a large, powerful sort of cyclic event of 7 years in relation to the moon, sun, the whole works. I mean, that's
why I brought up what would happen if you multiplied that 360 to 0.04 times 7, because we're talking about the Sabbath, the rest, the point of rest, the day of rest, the Seter Dog in other languages, satiation, Saturn, satiated, satisfied. That's the point where, we hit that hits the spot. We finally came back to the home we were wanting.
Actually, you should go to the next slide. That's really interesting. So I plugged in the 364-day calendar with the cipher. So you have a full movement from A to Z in the top half, and that would be capital letters. Then a full movement from A to Z, and that would be a lowercase letters in the bottom half. And so that's the cipher going through 4 times. And so when you apply the notes around, you actually get 7 octaves, and there's like 49 different notes or something like that. I worked it out. It's related to actual type of keyboard, but there's your 7 octaves. Seven turns up everywhere, man.
And check this out.
13-spoked circle is not easy to draw, so well done.
No, this looks pretty good. And there's 2 things that come up, but the first one I'll mention is that pianos start at A on the left, the low note, and the highest note is actually C. It's not A to A. So that works here too, which is insane. I mean, nuts, dude.
Yes, the division of 13 is geometrically extremely difficult to draw, but you don't really draw it. You actually just count days, and so that makes it a lot easier. But dividing by 12, yeah, that's why there's like these. You can use multiple sort of calendars, but counting days is super easy. Drawing 13 segments of a circle, very difficult.
Yeah. the 12 section circle is a way easier pie to slice, for sure.
Oh yeah, you do that in your sleep.
Man, this has been really interesting, guys. I feel like we need to get more of George's insights into the mix here after we've finished up the slideshow, which thank you for that, Lucas. It's set a nice table for us.
Beautiful.
Oh, you're welcome.
I do want to check out that book that you've got. I've got so many I'm already reading, so it's very helpful to get the cliff notes from you.
You know, one thing to mention also is that Pythagoras was said to be from Ionia. So I have a feeling there's some kind of little connection there for sure. There has to be.
Yeah, I mean, even just the core, Corinthian, Doric, you know, the core in the door.
Right. Oh, wow.
It's a corridor.
Wow.
Well, the C and the D is your 3 to your 4. Interesting. I also think the Doric reminds me of door as in deadly orgone radiation. Like it's the lunar, it's colder light, right? If the Corinthian is the solar. And then the Ionic, of course, IO is 1 and 0, hole and pole. It's the androgyne, the mediator, the middle ground.
Right.
And the ratios of those, what do you call them in architecture? Style or mode or something, you know. There's a certain word for it in architecture, but it's the ratios are 16, 18, and 20. In terms of Doric is 16 units high for a column, 18 units high for an Ionic, and 20 for a Corinthian.
Oh, wow.
And I wonder what maybe if that has any bearing on this other stuff, or if that's a separate, you know, system of measurement and classification. Not sure.
They might be hiding something there with how you would actually transfer those. If they're in a specific measurement system, if you transfer them into something else, they might give you more information.
Nice.
That is interesting. You know, that I'm looking at it. I'm trying to see if, you know, you said 16, 18, 20. So I'm trying to see if, you know, 1 + 6, 7, 1 + 8 is 9. The only thing I can think of is that, and they're not matching up with the ones that we've been discussing, but it's there, is that when you look at half steps, a fourth is 7 half steps, and the fourth is 5 half steps, but the fifth is 7 half steps. So I was trying to find something, but I don't think it's there.
There's 1618.
1618.
Isn't that a phi?
Yeah, it's phi.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So 1618, and then you, like you were saying, George, the 16 becomes a 7, 18 becomes a 9, and that's the periodic number for gold is 79.
Oh, AU.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So I want to know if anybody in the chat has any questions for George or Lucas specifically. And then while I wait for some of those to come in, I want to read from the Orphic hymn to Apollo.
Nice.
Because this is interesting. I mean, in terms of Apollo as a mediator, and very much like the Gemini twin of Hermes, like they're kind of both doing the same thing. Here's the segment I want to read. For the origin and completion are both in your care. The cause of the blooming of all things, with your resonant lyre, you harmonize the entire axis of the heavens, at one time advancing to the lowest pitch, and at another to the highest. At times in the Dorian mode, you temper the entire axis. You keep the tribes of living creatures distinct. Yeah, that sounds like separating the chaos into its places, right? You have mingled in harmony the share of all mortal men. You have mixed an equal measure of winter and summer. You have arranged the highest 3 strings in the winter, the lowest in the summer. You are the seasonal Dorian flower of the lovely spring. Thereupon the mortals celebrate and call you Lord, and Pan, the 2-horned god who sends the whistling winds. Wherefore you bear the formative seal of the entire cosmos.
Wow, I think we just laid out like months of mystery to unfold.
It's so true, man.
Okay, like the 1618 thing is like, that's the I and D. That's your phi is your personal health information. That's your ID. You identify. And it's got the gold in there. It's got the phi in there. And Chance, you said something in that poem about like keeping something alive. I think the placenta's in play. I'm always looking for placenta, but it's like, you know, their personal health information is part of your ID. And it's like there's like some kind of, they're playing the music of whatever, the mean value of your lifespan. You know, the threads that the weavers, that the 3 fates are keeping track of.
Well, it says you've mingled in harmony the share of all mortal men. But
Right.
The word share in a modern sense is how we use it. But what it means in the more archaic definition, to share something, is to violently divide it by cutting. So you've mingled in harmony the share of all mortal men. I don't know.
There's some stock market stuff going on here, y'all.
I just sent you something in Telegram, Chance, that relates to this ionic sort of ideas. And it will take us back to the idea of wind, which the winds of chaos or the 4 winds and those sort of things. So when I was looking at the ionic pillar, it took me back to this aeolic, and it means of the wind, referring to an action or power of the wind. And ionic wind is also like a plasmic wind. So it's a charged wind. It's how you transfer electrons, basically, or from one side to another. And that's, you can have, and you can think of an electrolyte in a battery as an ionic substance, but you can also think of it like in a gaseous terms, it's ionic. So it's a transfer from positive to a negative, or vice versa. It's how things are built. But I just noticed that when you look at the pillar itself, or the aeolic pillar, you'll actually see the ram's horns. Again, when you're looking at, and this is why I got stuck on that, the wind idea that Mario was talking about, which was fantastic. And this idea of the chaos winds and those sort of stuff. But when you actually, and it's something you said, Chance, where you can change the M to a W. When you do that with wind, the word wind, you actually get mind. So again, we've got this connection between aeolic, which is of the wind, and then you change the W to an M, and it's fucking mind. And so you've got your mental, the Mercury, the mind, as that singular pillar in the center. So it's just, yeah, it just
And
feels
the
like
air or wind correlates to mind in both Western and Eastern esotericism.
Yeah, and it's actually I was listening to this guy to speak about some of these creation stories in an elemental way, and it was really interesting. He said, well, first there's wind, first there's a space created, then there's wind, then the wind creates moisture, and then the moisture and the wind create the fire. And I'm like,
And just think about that in terms of electricity, how electricity is kind of a type of wind. If you need the space for there to be wind, it's the cavitation, pressure gradient, flow, fluidity of all things.
Yep, it's the differential, this pull and pull, push and pull between the fourth and the fifth in music. You know, it's this wants to move, and as George has said with the F sharp, when you play that tritone, it doesn't want to stay there. It wants to move to the next thing, which would be a G or the F. It doesn't want to stay in that spot. It's sort of creating movement by its very essence, and so that pillar, even though it's the rest point or the top of our skull, or that point where you go to meditate, the whole world sort of spins around you in a sense. It's that you are that ionic pillar. Your spine is the ionic pillar that creates the polarity, and all these sort of different ideas come into play. Probably getting ahead of myself here, but hopefully it's making sense.
Well, no, and even looking at the way these horns on the top of the aeolic pillar, we have the right brain and the left brain. Or if you go back to the chart that you made with the notes in a circle with the colors, you know, one side you have the 1, and on the other side you have the 7. And as you walk across from above or you walk below, whichever half of the semicircle you walk up, it's going from 1 to 7, 7 back down to 1, right? It mirrors each other, just the way that the septenary cipher of the alphabet walks up and then back down. So that's your left brain and right brain, which are mirrors, and how, like, for there to be any kind of movement, you have to have this mirror with a space between it. And that's like how there can be, yeah, and that's where existence can, physicality, you know, that's where the realm is built.
Yep, the pole in the hole, as Mario puts it. That's how babies are born and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's the same process, you know.
Yeah, this has been awesome, guys. George, you got anything cooking up in Third Eye Edify that we should know about, or recently published that you want us to check out?
Yeah, I just released an episode about, you know, witches, Macbeth, whole bunch of other stuff. Maybe a little Francis Bacon and a few other guys like that, and propaganda in general. I thought it was a pretty, you know, timing appropriate episode for the season. So people want to check that out. I think they'll enjoy it a lot. And what's coming? Oh man, I'm definitely going to do something on Amanita muscaria for sure. I've been thinking about that a lot, and theogens in general. I want to definitely do some more work on that. And I think that everything we're looking at here is actually getting me to think more about it in a certain way. The way the mushroom stem goes into the cap is looks like a maypole. It looks like the tent that we were talking about, you know, to start this conversation. It is another form of the ionic pillar, so in its own way, and it's also masculine and feminine at the same time, being a breast and a phallic thing at once. That's definitely on my mind. I'm diving into that. But having done all this, the next year of my life is already occupied in my mind. So there's way more to figure out here. There really is, because the terminology, there's so much overlapping terminology that it can't be an accident. Just like Lucas was showing with the gematria of those gods' names, how their story actually relates with the gematria too, which is just stunning. Same thing here. I'm sure we're just catching the tip of the iceberg here.
Oh yeah, we are. So the tip, man. Like, I reckon these guys that put together this stuff were on a whole different level.
Right. What was their training and who trained them?
Just, I call it information stacking, you know, and they just, once they had that firm basis, and that's what we sort of didn't get given,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and what we're all sort of searching for is a firm basis to build our information, to build our structure on. You know, we just didn't get given it. But, you know, for people that did, it's only God knows whether you get, you know what I mean? And
I
how
also
well
think
you
that there could be a factor here in synesthesia, and how maybe the natural state of the human being is actually to feel and then describe, rather than describe and then take your feelings from the description. That makes sense. That there's a primary consciousness experience of reality that is then separated into descriptors that we call the 7, 5 senses, whatever number you think you have. And then those senses are kind of like the description. They're a language of sorts. And in a synesthetic, maybe proto-human, pre-mind control type of existence, maybe, you know, the correlation of note to number and color was way more self-evident, and then it was just about accurately transcribing into the mythology what it is that was the felt experience of everybody, all innately and naturally. And then now we're like, so we're like having the experience of reality akin to playing a video game but only looking at the mini map in the corner, or walking downtown but only looking at the map on your phone and never looking at what's actually around you, and thinking this is where I'm at, I'm inside this map. And that's us with language. And so it's like you know, might be very, it explains maybe why it's so difficult to accurately build out this architecture of symbolic correlation, because we're doing it from within a construct rather than making a construct out of the natural materials.
and what it seems that they were teaching is like they started from the position of unity and then they expanded out. And that's exactly what you're saying there in a different way, is that like you get taught about the unity and then all the different things extend from it. And it's similar to the Zodiac in a sense. It's like you have the unity, and then avatars of that unity are the different expressions of the season, or different, how do you put it? Like essentially like Aries is an avatar of the singular one in the center as well. You know, they're just avatars of that type of expression, that type of note.
Yeah, man, I love that idea. Information stacking. That's going in my pocket for sure. You know, like one day I just realized that like we use the term first, second, and third, and we just think of them as, you know, on the surface level. But when you remove the numbers from, you know, 1 ST, 2 ND, 3 RD, you take the numbers out and you get standard. And there's like a level of revelation to being like, well, 1, 2, 3 is the standard. And so then you start looking at, that's what I do, is I look at all things that are standardized. And that's what this was. It was like a babushka doll party of all things that are standards and all the levels of revelation therein. I'm seriously going to be playing this back for a month and a half at least. And I'll probably be dropping comments in the show notes or in the comments section, like for a whole month, because this was great.
I love what you brought up there, because in the tense of language, all we have is first, second, and third person, right? And that's how the Godhead is described, as the 3 persons of the Godhead, the 3 in 1. But to really get to the Godhead, you're actually needing to go to the 4th wall. You know what I mean? Well, like, because you can have the experience of, you know, yourself as the 3rd, 2nd, or 1st person. But even whenever you're looking at your own consciousness or awareness as the I am, you know, looking at your own 1st person, which person's looking at that? Who's looking at the feeling of I am? Because there has to be, and there's the 4th wall, because that's sort of where the camera, the oculus is actually pointing from. And it's, you know, that perspective is seeing all the characters in the scene on the theater of life, if you will, from one unified front.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay. So the only other suffix I didn't use is the TH, like the first, second, third, and then there's the fourth.
Theos.
And TH is a 28, and it's Chronos. The T on top of the H. You put them together, and you get the sign for Saturn, and that's the fourth dimension. Is time.
Nice, dude. Yeah, and all the you know, Thoth, Teot, Tot, many different names of the Godhead too. The avatars.
Right.
And you know, another language trick, Lucas, if you want to be writing these down, because I know you want a chart, is I brought up the S to SH. T interchanges with TH as well. And actually T, TH, and SH have interchangeability. So there's a lot of overlap there, but side note.
Oh, look, I was still blown away by the wind and mind sort of, you know, change out. And then with water, you had matter. You just you do the same thing. You change the W with the M, and you get matter, which is the mother. And so you have this mind body. Mother is related to sort of the salt, the earth, and then you have the mind aspect of father, mother aspect, and Mercury sits.
You have Mars, Mar, and War. Mars, god of war, Marwar. You have mares, which are horses, and they travel carrying your wares, your commerce. You know.
Yeah, and they have a mane, which is a name. That was interesting too.
Wow.
So the hair. When you were talking about hair, it's always like it always brings back to like name. So giving something a name.
Wow.
Okay, I love it. All right, guys, let's wrap this up though, and closing thoughts are fine, but let's go around the horn. Gabriel, empty your cup, and then Lucas and George.
Oh my gosh! Thank you guys so much for bringing this together. Another mind-blowing experience. Yeah, big love. I mean, there's so many more babushka dolls to be birthed out of this little homunculus party we just had. I can't wait. So, yeah, thank you guys. It is awesome to be on this journey with all of you.
Oh, thanks. Look, it's great to be on here. I've really enjoyed this, and especially to George. Thanks, mate. Like, being able to talk to you and make sure I'm doing things correctly and laying things out has just been brilliant. So yeah, we'll keep communicating and work through more material. It's brilliant. So, and thanks, Chance, for having me on, mate. It's great. So
This ain't the last note on the musical topic, I'm sure.
No, I'd say no to that. But yeah, Chance, definitely. Thanks for slapping this together, man. I'm surrounded by
you guys did all the work. I'm just
in royalty.
run the show.
I feel like I'm in the royal court with you guys. It's wonderful. And Lucas, thanks for giving me the opportunity, because you keep sending slides and I'm like, every time I'm just like, amazing. What is this? And then I can say, oh, maybe this should be a 0 for the A or whatever, and I'm making small little knowledge-based adjustments on all of your hard work. It's awesome. And it's been a pleasure this whole time. I mean, it's incredible how it hasn't been that long since I was on, the InnerVerse a few weeks ago, but so much has happened since then. And now your fans get to see that. And I think that's an incredible aspect of all this. It's wonderful to be a part of, really.
The winds are blowing in our minds pretty quickly. Yeah. We're on the weave wave, as Gabriel was telling me in a voice message earlier today.
Nice.
All right, guys, we'll wrap it up and see you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in, everyone in the comments. Thanks for that super chat, Logan. Feel free to super chat now that that's possible on YouTube. Just throwing that out there. All right, much love, everybody. Night. Talk to you guys later.
All right. Thanks.